Alright, so it's going to be a super unprofessional video because I've never made one for something like this before, and I'm super late to the party, but it's bugging me, so I gotta say something. Last of Us 2 was always going to end up like this, and you know it. It's Last of Us 1 was not a happy game. Last of Us 1 was meant to be depressing. Sarah dies in the beginning, and it's gut wrenching. It rips your heart out of your chest. It's so depressing, and the game just does not cut Joel any breaks throughout the rest of the game, it seems. Last of Us 2 does with anger and hate what Last of Us 1 does with depression and sadness. You're supposed to hate Abby. Neil Druckmann knows you hate Abby. He wants you to hate Abby. Neil Druckmann knows that you are furious beyond belief about Joel's death. Because Ellie is furious beyond belief about Joel's death. So the irony is, the fact that people hate Last of Us 2 so much really only means that Neil Druckmann conveyed exactly the emotion he meant to convey with Joel's death. You're supposed to feel the exact same way Ellie feels. And the fact that so many people are so upset that they won't play the game, or they think the game's trash because of Joel's death, or they just think that it's basically just like a hot pile of garbage, proves that it got under your skin exactly like it was supposed to. Now, it's not flawless. Last of Us 1 was definitely more creatively free in the sense that it was made just because someone wanted to make it. Last of Us 2 was definitely made because people wanted a sequel. And so it's kind of carrying the weight of the first game on its shoulders, as any sequel always will. But that shows in a couple of ways. Everybody hates the sections where you play as Abby. Let's be honest. Everybody. I despised Abby, just like everyone else, the first time I played through. And I hated playing as her. The only reason I did it was to get back to playing as Ellie, because I just couldn't stand Abby. I wanted her dead. And yet, I don't know if they're objectively bad sections. I don't think it needed to be almost half the game. I don't think anyone wanted to play as Abby for almost half the game. But there is something to be said for the fact that it's interesting how they try to toy with your emotions by making you sympathize with Abby. It's a little cheap. It's a little underhanded in certain areas. Abby and her crew is definitely very underdeveloped, and that doesn't help. It's really difficult to sympathize with them when we know so little about them. Jordan, Manny, uh, Mel, all of them have like pretty much one or two personality traits apiece. Um, Abby has a pretty fleshed out personality, but it sucks. She's awful. Everybody thinks that. Um, Even some of her own squad mates. So yeah, they definitely could have done that better. I think possibly the way to go may have been to make you play as Abby, building up to Joel's death, and then from there you switch to Ellie's perspective. Because if you don't know Abby's going to kill Joel, that might have allowed players to warm up to her a little bit more. Um, and seeing her interact with her squad might have helped you sympathize with all of them a little bit more. I'm not sure. It's hard to say. But the point is, as far as Joel's death, It was always going to end like this because, let's be honest, Joel's death in this game is the equivalent of Sarah's death in the first game. Sarah's death destroyed Joel as a person, and in that same vein, Joel's death destroyed Ellie as a person. To some extent, Ellie handled it even worse than Joel did. The soldier who killed Sarah was already dead. Tommy killed him outright. There wasn't really anything, he could do to take revenge on him at that point. So Joel didn't have the option to go on a rampage to avenge Sarah's death. So that comes into play a little bit. But another thing is, I do actually appreciate the duality of Abby's story, even though I don't like it. I forgot to touch on this before. I really like that Ellie's is a story of falling from grace. Ellie is the moral compass of Last of Us 1. She teaches Joel, in a sense, even more than he teaches her about life and philosophy. Joel is a better person because he met Ellie. And in that same vein, Abby is a better person when she meets Lev. Lev is to Abby what Ellie was to Joel. And Abby's going through the same journey Joel went through in Last of Us 1. Meanwhile, Ellie's on this downward spiral. Abby's redeeming herself and becoming a better person as Ellie is becoming a darker, worse person. Ranting about stuff like this on situations like this is a lot harder than I thought it'd be. But yeah, there's a duality there that I think definitely can be appreciated if that's the type of story you're into. And I'm not saying you should get to the end of The Last of Us 2 and you should feel like Abby's a good person now and she deserves to be let go. I think if you get... Eventually, I warmed up to Last of Us 2, but it took me a while. It took me literally until the Rattlers section before I was able to say that I legitimately sympathize with Abby. But if you get to that section and you still want her dead, I get that. But again, that really just shows how successful Neil Druckmann was at putting you in Ellie's shoes. Because Ellie still wants her dead, that's for sure. What was I going to say about Joel? Oh, yeah. Another thing about Joel's death is people keep saying he didn't deserve it. The writers didn't respect him. I think it would have been better if Abby had just shot him in the head or something like that. Something quick, something painless, something that doesn't make it as easy for us to hate Abby. Because the way she killed him slowly and tortured him, that is fucked up. And we all know that. If you look at the faces of her squad mates, it's like they even know that. But then again, if she hadn't killed him slowly, that comes back to, like, maybe people wouldn't have had that same polarizing response that Ellie had. At any rate, as for Joel not deserving it, well, I don't know about that. He's worked very hard to become a better person. He definitely has sort of adopted a more positive mindset. But all the people he killed, all the people he hurt, all the people he took from, their lives didn't change. If you look at it in terms of real life, even after he chooses to do right by Ellie, Joel still did all the things he did. And I'm not even talking about the Fireflies. I'm talking about all the things that... Some of the stuff we might not even know about that happened in the 20 years between part 1 or the first section of The Last of Us 1 and later when he's in Boston with Tess. If Abby hadn't killed Joel, that day, it would have been survivors from some other Firefly outpost, or well, I guess that was really the only Firefly outpost that he attacked. Anyhow, it would have been survivors from Davidstown, or the hunters in Pittsburgh, or Fedra operators in Boston. The whole world was practically gunning for Joel. He like Ellie even says at one point when Dina's theorizing as to why Abby killed Joel, he crossed a lot of people, so many that it's not really even worth guessing who it was that killed him. Joel didn't even ask who Abby was because like he knew. Wait, I think he did actually ask who she was, but he didn't ask why she was doing it because he knew he'd wronged a lot of people in his life. Joel is not a good person, or at least he wasn't before he met Ellie. And I don't know if it's accurate to say that he didn't deserve his fate. We all love Joel because he was the main character. We relate to him because we played as him for, 10, 12 hours in Last of Us 1. But from the perspective of anyone but, Joel and Ellie and their little circle, Joel's a villain. So I don't know if it's 100% accurate to say that Joel was not properly respected in Last of Us 2. That being said, when he gives his badass line, say what you need to say and let's get this over with. Great line. Those are some pretty badass last words for Joel. When Abby says, you don't get to make this quick, that kind of undercut it. And that was frustrating. So yeah, like I said, Last of Us 2 is not a perfect game, but I don't feel that all the hate for it is really necessarily rational. I think it's understandable, but again, yeah, the fact that people hate Last of Us 2 so much, again, just proves that Neil Druckmann succeeded in getting, well, maybe not the commercial response out of people he wanted, but he definitely got the emotional response out of people that he wanted. And that's it, I guess.